war is unlawful. What we're doing over there is unlawful, and that any order to force me to participate in that is unlawful as well. And I cannot, according to my oath, violate that, my principles, and take part in it.
That's a 5-year sentence if you refuse a direct order.
Possibly, but I think that's the reason why we all joined the military, and it's the commitment we made to our country is to sacrifice everything. It's not necessarily just to go over to a foreign country and take a bullet or lose a limb. We sacrifice our lives, our freedom, to ensure that all Americans live in a country where we have true democracy and true freedom. There was a point where I felt helpless and that I saw so much corruption and so much violation of our basic constitutional laws and American laws and basically just the principles of democracy. And usually as a soldier you join knowing that you really don't have a voice, that you're apolitical, what you believe doesn't really matter. You go out and you execute according to your orders. But I saw so much of this corruption, like I said, going on in violation of laws. And there wasn't really anybody stepping up to either stand up and say, no, you can't do this, in terms of our politicians and also in terms of the people. I think a lot of the people out there were really apathetic to what was going on and not willing to radically change things. And so I felt that it was time for me to step outside of what a soldier is normally expected to do. But I still felt I was acting within my obligation and my duty as an officer to protect, as they say in our oath, the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so that's why I've spoken out publicly, spoken out against the misconduct going on within the highest levels of my chain of command, and also tried to set the example for all members of the military that they need to evaluate the legality and the truthfulness behind every order, including the order to go to war, and make the right decision regardless of the consequences. And also to hopefully help end this war. It is an illegal and unlawful war. And my ultimate goal is to end it so that all members of the military can come back home and be with their families.
Well, I'm out here today supporting our troops, especially those troops who stand up for the Constitution, like Lieutenant Ehren Watada did last week when he publicly said he was going to refuse unlawful orders, and those unlawful orders would be to deploy to Iraq, which he considers, along with most international and U.S. law experts, to be both an unlawful war and, as Amnesty International has documented extensively, the actual occupation as it's practiced is also unlawful and violates basic human rights. So he's, in the coming week, as his unit, the Stryker Brigade, deploys to Iraq, he will refuse orders, facing up to 6 years in jail for following the Constitution, doing the right thing against a war that he considers both illegal and immoral. So we and people all over the world are stepping up to support him, and his stand could become a turning point for the anti-war movement in the U.S.
I signed my papers when I joined the Army in March of 2003, and if you can recall, that was the invasion of Iraq. And during the run-up to it, I think, like many Americans out there, practically millions, we believed the administration when they said that Iraq had stockpiles. They guaranteed it practically on national television. Colin Powell guaranteed it to the world at the UN that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. They had the will and the intent to use it against their neighbors and the American people, and that Saddam Hussein had very strong ties to Al-Qaeda and he was responsible for 9/11. So I think, like many people out there, I believed what I heard numerous and numerous times. Since then, I've come to believe, I've been convinced that this, what they were telling us at that time, these premises for invading Iraq, were false, and that it was an intentional manipulation of intelligence around a policy that was already established prior to 9/11, prior to the invasion, prior to any preparations for this war, in order to get Congress and to authorize this war and to get the American people behind it.
You don't have to kill someone to be a hero, and I believe that Lieutenant Watada, Sergeant Benderman, they're heroes. They're heroes because they have decided to do what is right, despite the orders that they are given, that they feel that there is something more that takes precedence over unlawful orders, and that's to follow the conscience and to do what is right. And it's a very difficult decision, and they've come to this decision because they understand, they take seriously what their orders are. And that's why I'm here to support them. I see them as being on the front lines of the movement against this illegal war.
There are a lot of people within the military who have shown support. On that day after I gave my statement, people came up and shook my hand. A sergeant told me, "You're doing the right thing. I believe in what you're saying." And then I've received some emails from field grade officers and other non-commissioned officers, guys stationed overseas, and they all giving me their support, telling me I'm doing the right thing.
Well, we're down here trying to, among other things, point out that Lieutenant Watada is one of the real heroes of this nation, because as a junior officer, his primary responsibility is to his men, and to stand up and make sure that they don't commit crimes like were committed in Vietnam. And so he stood up in his conscience and he said, "I'm not going to lead these troops into committing crimes in an illegal, unjust war."
Soldiers have the power to shut down a war, and that's what soldiers did during Vietnam, and that's what they could do this during this war. But the key thing is, when those soldiers step up, it's up to us civilians to do everything we can to support them. So people all over the country on June 27th, as his unit is deploying and he's refusing and facing 6 years in jail, we'll be having a national day of protest. And people can find out about it at the website thankyoult.org.